Welcome to video number 2, reconciliation, where in the effort to build better interactions and relationships with people who have mental disorders in our community, the goal of video 2 is to answer the question of what evidence in our world shows a need for reconciliation? What has happened? What needs to be reconciled? The definition of reconciliation is the restoration of friendly relationships. A friend is one who entertains for another such sentiments of esteem, respect, welfare, and affection that he seeks and for his society. A friend is a well-wisher, an intimate associate, and this is Webster's dictionary. Here we see an idea of, in this definition, we see the idea of there being the desiring for the best for someone, even if there's nothing being given in return. What needs to be reconciled? The word reconciliation infers that there has been some sort of division. Well, what has happened in our society that has caused this division? The best answer to this, this is honestly a philosophical question that can be inferred by our faulty human condition. I believe that James Gustav Speth, an environmentalist by study and American environmental lawyer, sums up the impact of our human faults on society as a whole in the following quote. In this quote, he points out that habits of selfishness, greed, and apathy affect even our natural environment, the world we live in. Here is the full quote. It says, "I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that 30 years of good science could address these problems. I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that." I would add that these tendencies even affect our social relationships, the way we view, interact, and treat another human being. We tend to do things that negatively impact us, even when we know them to be wrong. An environmentalist may say that our faulty human condition shows itself by our tendency to do things such as overconsume, not being intentional to carpool, given fossil fuels' impact on the environment, choosing to capitalize and innovate for the next big idea rather than investing in eco-friendly products, finding fulfillment in the small things, or being hands-on with the less fortunate. In the mental health field, I would say that our faulty human condition shows itself by our tendency to judge others by how they look instead of by their hearts and minds. We have a tendency to believe stereotypes, which are common beliefs about a group of people, instead of doing our research to figure out what is the truth behind the matter. We are quick to kick people to the curb after they've done something to offend us. We also hold offenses instead of resolving issues quickly and moving forward in a relationship. We are quick to write people off as no longer worthy of our time or energy when they behave in ways that are not up to our expectations. And we often try to correct ourselves, however, we still mess up because it's a faulty human condition of ours. However, it definitely shows our need to be more intentional in our relationships. This is why I would like to give proverbal reminders throughout this series as a means of cultural and spiritual transformation, as Gustav Speth put it. So here are some proverbs from a variety of cultures that challenge us to think about what a friend is and what is required or needed in a friendship. A friend is committed to another's well-being. A friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. This means that a friend doesn't stop being a friend when things get tough. That is a biblical proverb. Something else that is needed in friendship is intentionality. A Yoruba proverb says, "Friendship does not accommodate a third person. It only accommodates a second person." This can be interpreted to mean friendships are always between two people. Even if there are a group of friends, it still boils down to how each person relates to each. Friendship is a closeness that transcends blood relation. A friend sticketh closer than a brother. Most people expect that siblings to be close, but a real friendship brings two closer than blood ever can or ever could. A French proverb that captures this same idea is, a brother may not be a friend, but a friend will always be a brother. Friendship also requires understanding that each of us have weaknesses. A friend without faults will never be found. So when a hurtful situation occurs, even if you believe you're not at fault, it's important to be able to humble yourself to a place of self-reflection so that you may act in a mature and caring manner to preserve that friendship. And again, that takes intentionality, to be intentional on self-reflection, asking yourself, how can I still care and love this person despite the hurt done to me? So what specific evidence shows the need for reconciliation in our world that directly concerns people living with a mental disorder within our communities? The answer to this shows itself in inequalities at all levels of society that people with mental disorders face. At the micro level, which is person-to-person daily interaction, individual relations in homes, on the streets, who we pass on the streets, and in our work environment, people we interact with on a daily basis. The meso level represents community organizations and also community resources. There exists at the meso level, we find cultural norms that often exclude people with mental disorders from having a part. We then see inequalities played out at the macro level of society. This is institutional organizations and settings such as prisons and healthcare systems.
When I've been in the field for next month, I think it'll be 20 years since I started doing ABA in Florida. But I believe it back then, the only coverage was through Medicaid in Florida. After I moved to North Carolina, at first, only families that were very wealthy could afford it, because being that it's an intensive therapy, most kids with ABA are getting somewhere between 10, or the suggested amount is between 10 and 40 hours a week. And so when you're having to pay out of pocket for it, you have to have a certain amount of money in it. And I know families in the past that have had to take out a second mortgage to be able to get coverage for treatment for their child. And some families have multiple children with autism. I've worked with several families that had two siblings with autism, and I even heard of another family that had three.
Wow.
But it was still very limited at that time. In Virginia and North Carolina, or nationwide actually, TRICARE would only cover the board certified behavior analyst or board certified assistant behavior analyst directly doing the therapy. They would not, they didn't have behavior technicians that they would reimburse for. So even though it was coverage, they put a cap on it of how much money was allotted. And then, so that limited the amount of service kids could access. And then also, only the certified person could do the therapy. And that's kind of like basically having doctors without nurses. When there's only the doctor level, then that's going to really put a strain on the doctors when they're having to do everything.
It is important to note that micro-level societal interactions feed into the macro-level society. That is, interactions that are good or bad.
The insurance companies would say that these things in order to not cover it, which is basically discrimination. And they were discriminating against people with autism to access the therapy. And it wasn't right. So one thing that we did as ABA providers, and we would get together with families and other people in the community to, lobby the legislature and make phone calls, emails, everything. Eventually did become successful, but it took years to get there. Many years that lots of kids lost out on therapy during that time.
Right.
And
to better understand how interactions at smaller levels of society bring out inequalities at larger levels of society, we'll take a look at principles found in rational emotive behavioral therapy. Rational emotive behavioral therapy was developed by Albert Ellis in 1955. It is a therapy that helps individuals identify beliefs and rigid thought patterns that keep them from achieving their goals. It is often used by people experiencing extreme emotions such as anxiety, depression, guilt and anger, unhealthy eating, and procrastination. And it can also help one to recognize debilitating thoughts and helps them to retrain or train their own minds to think in line with the ways needed to reach their desired goals. The essential part of this therapy is founded upon the fact that our thoughts, things that are pondered, ruminated, or meditated on, determine our beliefs, which is our beliefs determine our approach to life, our motivation, our life philosophies, which then lead to our actions. That's any behavior that we can do, including what we say and how we treat ourselves and how our treatment towards other people. Thoughts are understood to be powerful in that they motivate and determine how we engage with the world around us, including the people who are around us. This is why I've included proverbial sayings throughout this series in the hopes to foster good thoughts concerning friendships and people. Thank you so much for joining this conversation on reconciliation and our need to restore relationships with individuals with mental disorders who face inequalities at all levels of society. We discussed our faulty human condition that requires us to continually be intentional in our relationship building and maintaining at all levels of society. If you're interested of hearing some objective reports and historical reports about these inequalities that exist, please check out Reconciliation Part 2. In the next part of this series, the title is Truth About Mental Disorders, where we will learn about what a mental disorder is, their signs, symptoms, and some treatments. We will also take a look at some historical geniuses who lived with a mental disorder yet still made impactful contributions to our society. See you soon. Bye-bye.